since we do know that we can at least practice compassion and grow stronger in it. You know, we've reflected through psychology and coaching that people can gain compassion through connection, internally and externally. But we say, and we again reflect scientifically, that it truly has to start with self-compassion, right? And I know that we've experienced that ourselves, that awful negative brain bias that can take over, and we talk about a lot because it is so prevalent. And so if we're quick and easy to say bad things about ourselves, to be hard on ourselves, it is going to be so easy for us to do the same thing to others.
Mm-hmm.
To judge others, to put them in categories, to label them, because we've already done it to ourselves. We're in a box. Everyone else should be in a box. Right? And so we start with that level of self-compassion, because chances are high we're not going to change anyone else either. So start here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the only thing we can direct is our own perspective and action.
Right.
So, yeah, it is amazing when we start to choose to be more compassionate to ourselves, how that can open up the door for us to be that to and for others as well. It's like, Steve talked about that in a podcast earlier this month, and how he's doing that in business, and how him individually, the more compassion he had for himself, the stronger he did for others, including his employees, which then helped his bottom line. And then, it was a whole beautiful discussion about how compassion can benefit your business. Such a beautiful point. But it all had to start with him as the CEO, the founder. I mean, everyone's going to be looking at him to set the tone. And so we can do that, and it can change people, but not because it's forcing them. It's because it's inspiring them. And it's not because we are saying you have to do this or you need to change. It's sparking, as you always say, sparking that light within themselves, what's possible. You just have to be able to see it first. And once you can see it, then you realize it's possible. And then it's like, oh, and that's what you did for me. When I saw the compassion you had for yourself, the compassion you had for others, and how that fueled you, it's like, I want that. I want to experience that. And you're right, it did started with myself, and had to dive in. And crazy enough, that was the hardest thing. It was easy to be compassionate to a level that I understood at the time. It was easier to be compassionate to others than it was to myself. And even some degree, even today, even these days, it's, even though I've done a lot of practice and continue, it's just the times of my life that I wasn't compassionate to myself far outweigh the times I was.
Yes.
Now, every single day, I'm seeking to create more balance in that and growing that side, so they do even out, and hopefully get to a point, throughout my life, that it becomes greater on the compassionate side than the non-compassionate side. But just like anything, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes dedication. But what greater calling is there to be dedicated to love?
I agree. And when you see an entire organization like StevenDouglas, or like James and Lance, who
Yes.
were talking about the entire Robeson Reserve communities that are built around staff having compassion for self and compassion for each other, that then inspires the members of the community to have compassion for the staff and have compassion for each other. You see that it can actually be contagious. But it actually starts with each individual within themselves, and then like that light just kind of, it keeps going and it keeps going. And it was palpable being in that community. You could actually feel the joy. And it wasn't like we walked on and we were like, oh, we were anticipating this. No, it was, we walked on anticipating we were going to see a standard community that had some really good practices and principles. And you pulled in there and it was just, everyone was happy. People were singing. It was joy in motion. And it really does start from that place of knowing we're not going to be perfect all the time. And we're going to make mistakes. And we're going to be okay with that. And we're going to lift each other up when we do make mistakes. And we're going to just address it. And we're not going to make each other feel bad. And that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. We're going to lift each other up because I choose to lift myself up.
Yes. I know how to do it because I've worked this out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's amazing. We see this in business as James and Lance were talking. It attracts the top talent, which then builds the business. It helps grow. Then everyone's happy. I mean, we walked in, the place is spotless. It looks like, it'd been open for 3 years, but it looks like it'd been open for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it was just mind blowing. And so, it's that love and compassion is permeating into everything from culture to purpose to attention, all the way down to the cleanliness of the space. You just want to be everything you look at, everyone you look at. There's just this happiness and this love and this feeling of united connection that is just infused into the space, because that's what everyone is choosing to be, and therefore their actions reflect it.
One of the things they said in our discussion was, as staff, we get to go home. But what we have to keep in mind is this is where people live.
Yeah.
They don't get to just clock out and leave. Mm-hmm. And so we have to have the foresight, the compassion, and the care to leave their home the way we would keep our home. Mm-hmm. And I had never heard that before. And, I have been to thousands of senior or assisted living communities, but I've been to a fair number. And I had never heard that come out of anybody's mouth before. So that is a level of compassion and connection that, to me, begins with that awareness, that self-awareness, and then that awareness of what's outside of self, so that then you can connect and know. And James even talked about that with the ping pong table, right? He had noticed that people had pushed 2 tables together and put a net on. Because he walked the property, he could notice that, okay, I can fix that for them. I can just get a ping pong table for here. Yeah. He couldn't just let that go. He could have just let them spend their time playing ping pong on 2 tables with a net. But he had compassion for the people who lived there and took the effort to just bring in a ping pong table.
Right. Yeah. And when that kind of compassion is presented, the people living there are going to want to present that type of compassion back to those who work with James and James himself.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it becomes this beautiful circle. And that's why I was kind of going down that road, because it doesn't only just work in business, and we tend to forget that, but it not only works in business, it works individually. When we start being compassionate for ourselves, towards ourselves, we start to attract, in business it would be greater talent, but we would say maybe stronger friendships, connected relationships. Those who you start to attract that same type of connection point. So when you're at home or in your social settings, or when you're at work, you're creating this beautiful vibration of love, connection, and unity that is flowing into and infused in all aspects of your life. Therefore, you're not putting it in a box or putting aspects in a box. You're creating continuity of compassion throughout all levels of self and all experiences of self.
Yeah.
And that's why self-compassion is so impactful.